Welcome to our demo, and thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to look at IsoPilot, the latest Roland Group app for enhancing your use of SmartPlant Review. IsoPilot is a tool that's designed to augment the review and documentation of your piping isometric drawings. So let's jump right in and see how it works. You'll start IsoPilot from the Accessories menu. Now, IsoPilot is designed to work with the data that you already produce when you extract piping isometric drawings using your 3D plant design system. So let's look at some of that data. Here I have a folder with some files in it. You can see, for example, I have a PCF file, which is a file that is produced when you extract an isometric drawing. And you'll see that it's just nothing but a text file with information about that pipeline. To go along with that PCF file, I also have a PDF file, which is basically the extracted isometric drawing that you already create. Okay. And then you also may have, for some versions of your ISO drawings, instead of a PCF file, you may have an IDF file. So you can see we have some of those files here as well. But the point is, this is data that you already create when you extract your piping isometric drawings. Now, before you use IsoPilot, you'll need to tell it a few things about how you want to review your ISOs. So let's look at those settings for a minute here. And really, I would say that within 1 hour you can complete all the setup that you need to do to use IsoPilot. But let's take a look at some of those settings. First off, we have ISO definition settings. These settings simply tell IsoPilot how to get the information out of those isometric data files, the PCF files and the IDF files, and how to correlate that information to objects in the SmartPlant Review model. So that's the first block, the ID properties. The part properties simply tells IsoPilot what properties you want to display when you're reviewing part properties for the ISO. The second settings are the ISO style settings, and this is basically just the color that you want to use and whether you want to use a solid or a transparent style for displaying the objects that are in the ISO line, the objects that are in any connected lines, and the objects that are in any connected equipment. And then finally, there are some output settings. One of the things you're going to see later is that with IsoPilot, we can export enhanced PDF documents to document those ISOs. And so we need to tell IsoPilot a few things about these PDF documents. So for 2D PDFs, we need to tell IsoPilot what is the sheet size that you want to use, or instead of specifying a sheet size, you can specify an actual template that you're going to use. So for instance, this template might be a blank PDF file that just shows a drawing border with your project information in it. Second, on the 2D Content tab, we're going to tell IsoPilot what is it that we want to add on these 2D PDF documents when we export them. So you can add color-coded images to your PDF documents. So in the Images block here, you have a list of images, and for each image, you tell IsoPilot the view direction and the boundary width for clipping the volume, the size of the image in the PDF file, and the location of the image on the PDF sheet. So these will be color-coded images, and you'll see how that works when we export 2D drawings in a minute. And then on the labels, in the labels section, we can tell IsoPilot different annotations that we want to place on this 2D PDF document whenever we export a 2D PDF. Finally, we can tell IsoPilot that we always want our images to have a white background. And when we export a 2D PDF drawing, we can actually include the existing ISO drawing in this new document that we create, and we can either prepend or append the existing ISO drawing. And again, you'll see how that looks in a few minutes. Finally, on the Output tab, we just tell IsoPilot where we want to output PDF documents and any prefix and suffix that we want to use for the file names for the documents that we export. So that's all the setup that's required for IsoPilot. Once we've done those few steps, we're ready to use it. The way you use IsoPilot is first just add some of those data files to IsoPilot. So we're going to go to the folder that contains those files. You can see again we have the PCF file and a couple of IDF files out there. We're just going to add all of those to IsoPilot. So you might have a whole folder full of hundreds of ISO files that you might want to add to IsoPilot. Then there are several things we can do with IsoPilot. First, we're going to look at how you simply use these files to review your ISO in the SmartPlant review model. So this might be perfect if you're a person who has to check a lot of piping isometric drawings. So as an example, I can select this drawing or this data file, this PCF file, and then I just say I'd like to review that ISO. What IsoPilot is going to do is use that information that we created in the setup and then determine which objects in the SmartPlant review model belong in the ISO, which objects are in lines that are connected to our ISO line, and which objects are in equipment that is connected to that line. And you can see that based on our settings, it color-coded the model to show this ISO and zoomed us directly to that ISO line. There are several things you can do in this ISO review form to help you review this piping ISO. Obviously, you can change the style of any of these groups. So for instance, if I wanted the connected lines to be transparent and I wanted them to be yellow, that's easy enough. Perhaps I don't want to see the background, I want to hide the background. That's easy as well. Let's set it back to a transparent color. And then you can do things by selecting the group. So for instance, I can select the ISO line and I can say, well, clip the volume of the model to that line. Or I can select multiple groups. So I'm going to select the ISO line and the equipment and say that's where I would like to clip the volume to, and then maybe I would like to fit the volume to those two items. And then also, of course, you can come over in SmartPlant Review then and review this ISO using the fly tool. And IsoPilot has made that very easy for you by allowing you to zoom directly to that line and then clip the volume around that line. Other things we can do, we can take these items and we can say, let's maybe highlight those, or we can actually create a select set in the SmartPlant review model of all of the items in the groups that we've selected here. Finally, we can use the Show Parts button here to show all the parts that are in this ISO line. So here you can see we have a list then of all the parts that are in this ISO in a grid view. And the properties that are displayed are the properties that we selected to display in our definition settings a few minutes ago. In addition, it shows the file name that each part is in. Now, you can manipulate individual parts the same way as we did the groups. So for instance, if I want to zoom to this valve in the parts list, I can use the menu here and zoom to that part. Let's fit the entire line again, so I'm going to go out here and fit this line. And you can do the same things. You can clip the volume to a part, highlight a part, select a part, and that can be a single part or multiple parts. But the other thing that you can do is when the auto highlight button is active, whenever you click on a part, it will highlight that part in the model. So for instance, you can see different parts are highlighting in the model as we select them in the data grid. So that helps you to identify the part in the model and associate it with the part in the data grid. So that's how IsoPilot can be used to review your piping isometric drawings in the SmartPlant review model. Now let's look at a couple of other features. First, we're going to look at how IsoPilot can export 2D PDF drawings to help you in the documentation of your piping isometrics. Let's set our clip volume back off and turn off our select set. What we're going to do is we're going to select multiple data files here, and we're going to tell IsoPilot to export 2D PDF drawings for each one of those. And then we just let it run. So you could select many data files here to do all of this in a batch, but you'll see that what IsoPilot is doing is color coding each one of those and snapping some different views based on the definitions that we created in the definition file, the settings that we created in the definition file. And you can see here that when it's finished, it shows you the log results and shows you the settings that were used during the export, and then the result for each line. Now, for the first line, which is a PCF file, we were successful. On the other two lines, we were unsuccessful. We had an error, and it's because those two lines are IDF files and they require different settings. So we'll show how to resolve that in a minute. But let's go take a look at the successful isometric that was created, and that's in our output folder. And here is the file that IsoPilot created. Let's open that file. And you can see that the first sheet in this new document that IsoPilot created is the existing ISO drawing. And that's because we told IsoPilot in our settings that we wanted to include the existing ISO drawing and we wanted to prepend that, so it's the first sheet. The next sheet is the new sheet that IsoPilot created, and you can see several things about this sheet. First of all, it has a drawing border, and that's because we told IsoPilot to use a template PDF file to create this document. So the template PDF file has a border in it, so that's why we see a drawing border. So that could be your project-specific drawing border. And the next thing you see are the images. We told IsoPilot in our settings for our images that we wanted to create a color-coded view of an ISO view, a plan view, and 2 elevation views. And in our settings is where we told IsoPilot how big to make these images and where to place these images on the PDF sheet. And then you can see that we've also added a few labels again from our settings. So the view labels here that you see are from our settings, and you see the line name in the bottom right hand corner with a username and a date. Those are all labels that we asked IsoPilot to place in this drawing. So you can see for each one of your ISO drawings then you can create what we might call an enhanced isometric document that includes not only your ISO drawing but also the color-coded images to help anybody that needs to look at this ISO to understand how this line actually looks in the physical model. So, you know, this might be a valuable document to your construction crews who have to go and erect this piping to really give them a good sense of where they are in the model, where this line goes, and how it's configured relative to all the model objects around it. Now let's take care of the problem with the 2 ISOs that failed to publish. So you can see we have 2 files here that are actually IDF files, and the one that was successful was a PCF file. So this is a situation that might not actually be that unusual. So if you're on a project that has multiple engineering contractors contributing to this project, you may have different firms using different settings to extract their ISOs, and you need to handle that by having different settings here for IsoPilot. So it's a simple matter if you're a user and you run into this situation to create different settings files for the different types of files that you receive. So as a user, I just simply go to my ISO definition settings, and I've got another file out here that I can use for the IFC files, and I just select that file as my settings file. And now those are my active settings, and if I choose to re-export these 2 IDF files, we'll see that then that export will be successful. Same as before, you'll see that IsoPilot is color coding those ISOs and snapping the views that you've asked to place into the 2D PDF files, and then you'll see the log results when it's finished. So you can see in this case we got success for both of those ISOs because we simply used the settings file that had been set up for our IDF files. And finally, you might also want to export a 3D PDF file for each one of your ISO drawings. So we're going to select the Export 3D command. And again, you'll see that IsoPilot is going to color code each ISO. And in this case, instead of exporting a 2D PDF document, it's going to export a 3D PDF for each ISO. And at the end, again, you'll get your log results that show you the settings that were in place and also whether each ISO was successful or failed. And if we look at our output directory, you can see that 2 3D PDF files were created, one for each ISO. So let's open this PDF file. Here you can see the 3D PDF file. You can see that our ISO has been color-coded just like in the 2D PDF files. And sure enough, it is a 3D file. You can look at this from all different orientations, zoom in, zoom out. And in addition, it's an intelligent 3D file, so if we show the properties, we can click on items in the PDF file and you can see the properties for the items in the property window. Of course, these 3D PDF files are very small, very portable, easy to use 3D files, so if your construction crews perhaps are working in the field and they have a tablet and they want a small file they can easily use to review the ISO, this is the perfect solution for them. Thank you for watching the demonstration. I hope you see how ISOPilot can help you with your isometric drawing review and documentation processes. It's a very simple tool, easy to install, easy to use, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks.